Hello, I'm Robert, a voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this is about Trump's claim that he's going to test nukes on an equal basis, which would mean no nuclear tests because nobody else is testing nukes. So now let's look at what he actually says. He says because of other countries' testing programs, well, nobody is testing nukes. And when it comes to other things, the US is doing more missile tests with dummy warheads than anyone. And it's also likely doing more subcritical tests, which is a way of testing your nuke without it exploding, which is a safe way of doing it that the advanced nuclear weapon powers can do. And the United States has done over 30 of those. They release no radioactivity and they don't count as nuclear tests. And then he says he's instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. Well, if it's truly an equal basis, the US has to scale back because it's doing more than anyone else. And he says the process will begin immediately. Well, the US is in a US government shutdown, and Trump hasn't been granted the funding for the military for 2025 to 26 yet, which he gets from Congress. So as a result of that, he can't start any new programs. He can only continue things that he's already doing. So the beginning immediately, that confirms that he's just talking about doing what they're already doing. So, and I explained there about how they don't need to do nuclear tests. I'll come to that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So that's just continuing what I'm saying. And so in short, it's another meaningless Trump statement, and it sounds impressive, but it makes him seem tough, but it actually says nothing. And then I just want to say that nuclear tests, they don't start a nuclear war anyway. When I was about 5 to 6, the world did 250 atmospheric tests in about a year and a half. And there wasn't a nuclear war, of course there wasn't. And many think that these tests actually stopped wars, and the main reason they don't do them anymore is because, first of all, the radioactivity, although it decays very quickly with an atmospheric test, the nuclear radioactivity has mostly gone away really surprisingly quickly. And then if you've got a ground penetrating or a shallow sea test, then it does persist, but it's only locally, and it gradually decays away, but over long periods of time. So, and this is my graphic summary of that. And you can see that, I forgot to add that bit about the 250 tests. I'll do an update of this graphic that'll explain it. And the underground tests release almost no radioactivity to the surface. So you're not talking about radioactivity if the US was to resume tests, but it's not going to do it. It doesn't make sense at all. And I checked up the news today in my 1960s level of detail update for the Ukraine war, and the only story I really found today is TASS saying that it's not doing nuclear tests, which is the truthful thing to say, because the tests it's doing are not nuclear. So there's nothing in the Associated Press, even the BBC, Sky News aren't running anything. And I listened to the BBC TV news headlines today, and there was nothing about it. So it's mainly social media that I'm doing this for. So I just expand a little bit on some of these points. So first of all, Russia did 2 recent tests, which hit the sensationalist press a little bit, but they're totally pointless. What it's done is it's put a miniature nuclear reactors, which of course the US has too, and it's put them into a cruise missile and a torpedo. Well, nuclear reactors are useful for powering nuclear subs and for aircraft carriers, which Russia doesn't even have a nuclear aircraft carrier. It never developed that technology. It doesn't have an aircraft carrier at all. But they're useful for that. But they're useless for missiles because you can't use them for conventional warheads, because the missile would have a nuclear reactor on it, which has got nuclear fuel on board, which means that when it crashes, it spreads radioactivity around. You don't want to do that. And it's utterly pointless for a nuclear weapon because they're so slow. They would take hours to cross the Atlantic. And when you've got nuclear subs, which can be anywhere already, and when you've got ICBMs, what's the point in a slow-moving cruise missile which is easy to shoot down, and a torpedo which takes hours to cross the Atlantic? When they switched, United States and Russia switched to conventional torpedoes in the mid-1960s because there's no point in adding a nuclear weapon to a torpedo which can already sink a ship without it. So, and if the ship spots it coming, it can as easily shoot down a torpedo that's got a nuclear weapon on it as a torpedo that's got a conventional warhead. So it's utterly pointless. These are pointless weapons. They're just propaganda. So, and perhaps to try and cover up that he doesn't have a nuclear aircraft carrier, for instance, which is extremely useful. So the many things it does, but it does them already. So it's doing its tests of missiles with dummy warheads. Look at them last year. So far, the US has tested 6, and Russia's tested 2. So the US does far more tests of those systems than Russia does, and you can hardly call these a nuclear powered torpedo. It's not really much of a test, so I don't think it's even worth mentioning really. And if you look at Russia is actually running into lots of problems with its ICBMs. A lot of its ICBMs were actually made by Ukraine, and their shelf life ended in 2023. So it's got ICBMs that still work, but they're beyond their shelf life, so it hasn't got a huge amount of confidence that they're actually going to work. And it's some of them might take off, might explode in the launch pad or something because they haven't been tested there, because they're beyond their shelf life, which was the Ukrainians stopped maintaining them in 2014, and Russia hasn't really been able to take over from the Ukrainians in maintaining its own ICBMs. And so it developed its new RS-28 Salmat, which is completely Russian built, but it doesn't seem to have mastered the technology because it keeps exploding. It had one successful flight, 2 failures. Second was a big explosion that created a 60-meter wide crater when Russia tried to launch it. Nevertheless, Russia is planning to replace its ICBMs with Salmats, which means that many of them would explode on the launch pad, probably. So Russia isn't really that far ahead on ICBMs. It's really quite backward, whereas the US has moved. It frequently tests its ICBMs. It's moving to a new modernized ICBMs as well, but much more sensible ones that are modernized by being more precise and not trying to put lots of warheads in one big missile, which is what Russia is doing, which doesn't make a lot of sense at all because it's limited to 1,550 anyway. So basically, Russia's ICBM program is in a bit of a mess at the moment, and it's not something to boast about at all. Talk here about the subcritical tests. Now, there were 30 critical subcritical experiments that the US has done, and Russia probably does subcritical tests too, but it probably does, and main activity today is related to subcritical testing, and we know where it's carried out, but they don't announce the subcritical tests, so we don't know how many that Russia's done. And then there's the nuclear-powered carriers, where the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, that's a technology the US has and France has, and Russia and China don't have. And it's the only way that an aircraft carrier can cross oceans unless you've got lots and lots of places to refuel. So the 2 United Kingdom aircraft carriers are fossil fuel powered, but then United Kingdom has got air bases all over the world, has seaports all over the world where it can refuel. China has only got a tiny port in Djibouti. It's the furthest it's gone with its fossil fuel powered aircraft carriers is the southern Philippines. And Russia hasn't got an aircraft carrier at all, and without an aircraft carrier, its ships can travel all over the world, but they've got no air support, which makes them very vulnerable. So the both Russia and China, they have a coastal navy called the Brown Water Navy. They don't have a navy that's really able to project powers across oceans because they don't have aircraft carriers that can cross oceans. So, and then this is about how nuclear tests don't. This is expanding on what I said in the introduction. You know, this about that thing. But, oh yes, one atmospheric test every few days in the early 1960s. I change that to 250 atmospheric tests. I think it's just a little bit more catches the eye a bit better. And then just, yeah, I talked about all that. Now this is another thing that China and India, they vote every year for a convention to prohibit all nukes. And they're the only nuclear weapon states to vote to quickly prohibit all nukes. So the US is constantly talking up the Chinese nuclear weapons, and it says the nuclear weapon is going to have a vast number of nuclear weapons. So you go down and look down there. This is the US projection, the number of nukes. They expect them to have 1,500 nukes in 235. They're always vastly over-projecting, and this is the biggest over-projection ever that they did. And this is the Federation of Atomic Scientists. They expect to continue its modest growth. They start possibly slightly increasing through to 2035. But remember that what China really wants is to get rid of the things, and so do India. So do bear that in mind when you hear the US making these absurd projections that China is going to have more nukes than them in a few years in 2035. That doesn't make sense at all. And what China is waiting for Russia and the United States to reduce their nukes, and then it's willing to join in once they've got very small numbers of nukes. And that's basically China's position. This is about the nuclear reactor torpedo. It's and it'd be only really useful for carrying nuclear weapons, and it's vastly inferior to a nuclear submarine, and it seems to be absolutely no point in it whatsoever from a military point of view. And then just as US moving aircraft carriers around, it's not a nuclear test. So a test for a nuclear reactor powered torpedo is not a nuclear test. It's just a nuclear reactor. And then I just added this recently. I thought this might help people. That this is a thing that people don't really seem to properly realize. A nuclear war is not a no-win scenario. If you had a no-win scenario, then some countries might do a war knowing there's no win, but feeling they're going to harm the other side. But this is a lose massively scenario, and nobody ever engages in a scenario like that. And so countries have numerous precautions to prevent us ever having a nuclear war, and that's the background. So that it could only really happen by mistake. And in case of Russia, if it used a nuke, the lose massively would be not US using nukes back. It would be that NATO would take over the Russian airspace. It can likely do that in a few days. And then after that, then Russia would likely be forced to get rid of its nukes. I mean, that's the likely scenario. It couldn't stop it can't destroy the NATO air capabilities with nukes. They're very imprecise. They're totally useless for fighting to try to win a war. So they're only useful as a deterrent because they're not very accurate. There are ways of a nuclear base is protected against them. The fallout has limited short-term effects. They can't be used for winning wars. They're pointless for that. So and then I talk about how this is a table that will pop up. Yes. So this is a table of the shoot downs through to, if you look at the dates, you might be able to see the dates on a high resolution. That's 2015 was the last shoot down, which was in Syria, where Turkey was shot down a Russian Su-24. Before that, we go back to 1983. That was an airline shot down by the Russians. And then if you go back there the United States was shot down by North Korean. This shot down by MiG-19. You go back to 1960. So if you go back to 1960 and then the 1950s, there were numerous fighter jets and other aircraft that were shot down, and that's 1960. A U-2 spy plane and a MiG-19 also lost to friendly fire. US fighter jets, lots and lots of fighter jets were shot down. In some cases, and then this is what happened after. This is the number of casualties, and you can see there were many casualties. Most of them died. There were over 300 casualties in Soviet Union MiG-15s shot down by UN forces in the Korean War, and secret Soviet involvement. So look at all these times they were shot down, and none of those led to a nuclear war, because they led to immediate de-escalation, and these are about how each event led to diplomatic protests, immediate, and that's it, and then and no military retaliation, and usually they were classified, hidden. There were prisoner exchanges for some of them. That is what would happen if ever did get as far as a fighter jet shot down, but it's not going to happen. I mean, well, there's numerous precautions to prevent even that happening. And then if it did happen, it'd be immediate de-escalation. So that's why when people ask me, is there risk of a nuclear war? I say no, there's no risk. I think that's the fairest way to look at this. There's you work it out for yourself that the numerous precautions to prevent an accident, they're not going to do it deliberately. So how is there ever going to be a nuclear war? It's not a realistic possibility. And this is the reasonable assessment. And I should add the bit there about Admiral Ratkin says that Russia is never going to attack NATO. Maybe add that in there as well. You can read my, this is about the local in Ukraine and the Middle East, and why Putin will never use nukes, and how we can know that if there was a risk of nuclear war, as in the Cold War, at the beginning, especially when I was a younger child, then there was more of an atmosphere that maybe there might be nukes that would actually be used. And we all knew what to do if there was a nuke that fell on our city. We knew what to do. And it's how to protect yourself, and so you wouldn't get radiation sickness. So how many people today know how to protect yourself from radiation sickness if there's a nuclear war? Most people will say you take iodine tablets, which is utterly useless. That's for a nuclear power reactor accident after you've eaten the food. If you were to eat food that'd be contaminated, you didn't see it in the news. Or to breathe the air, drink the water, especially. What you do is you get indoors out of the fallout, and if you can get well away from the dust falling out of the sky, you're not going to get nuclear radiation sickness. How many people know that? Almost nobody that I contact knows that. And the reason is because the authorities know that we don't risk a nuclear war, for the reason I just explained. So they don't tell us what to do because we don't need to know. So that's going to read why we don't risk a world war from Ukraine or Middle East, China, North Korea, or anywhere else in the world. It's next to impossible. And do just a shout out to our new Doomsday Debunk group at ddebunk.org. That's where you can talk to me and other debunkers and ask us questions. And if you're good at debunking, do join there, or help people, reassure people who are scared, and anything like that, then you're very welcome at our new ddebunk.org. I actually had to go there, long story, but it's because Facebook has, and please, unfortunately you can't contact me at Facebook anymore, not unless you already talked to me there, because Facebook's algorithm has mistakenly classified me as a spammer based on my fact checks of scared people, things like this, things like what I'm saying just now. And the algorithm reads replies like this to scared people on Facebook, and it told me that I must stop doing this. And it did that with several comment replies, very similar to what I'm saying just now. I did that eventually with post as well. Well, with the post it stopped was one saying that I'm going to have to move to a new forum because of this misidentification as a as a spammer. So it stopped me from posting that as well, claiming that it was spam, and it stopped me from receiving new email, new Facebook contacts. So you can't talk to me via Facebook. And this has gone on for over a month, and just before quick succession, it told me not to that I was doing too much of this when I tried to post to my own fact-checking group, saying that I would have to move to another forum because of all this stopping me from posting and commenting, and then it said I can't do. It said I mustn't do this for 2 days when I tried to like a fact check by another fact checker in my own group. And at this point, I looked up online, and this suggests that I was very close to being completely prevented from using Facebook at all, and possibly my device is not permitted to even see it. So at that point, I just stopped immediately. Facebook's algorithms, they're no appeal, no human beings at any level. So you just appeal to more algorithms that don't even look at the content. And I've discovered there's a great risk that if I were to keep trying to comment or post, the algorithm doesn't warn you about this in case you are a spammer, because it doesn't want to warn spammers about them risking being blocked. But there's very likely it'll be a very sudden block if I try to post a comment again on Facebook. And that would mean I couldn't talk to people that I'm already talking to. And I have tested recently, someone tried to contact me on Facebook with a message, and I wasn't permitted to accept the message. And this suggests that that the algorithm is still classifying me as a spammer, so it's not safe for me to try to comment or post again on Facebook. And I don't know when it will be safe for me to do that again. So I'm on deep. It's actually had a very good effect. This new website is all set up for voluntary fact checking, and I can customize it. It's just for that. It's for nothing else, not social media. I built it myself using free open source software, and I can customize it in any way I like to make it, and it's only set up for voluntary fact checking and for scared people who are scared about things like this. And I can add lots of tweaks, and if you've got recommendations, I can customize the software with various extensions you can get and my own coding. So do come and join us there and for help and to help others. So it's actually been a big positive, although it's very sad. And the Doomsday Debunk group is continuing with Stevie Lee McCarthy is running it in place of me as and it seems to be going pretty well. And so they seem to be doing all right without me there. And then I've got my doomsdaydebunk.org, and they can then use my fact checks there and post them to the group. So I'm doing everything there because I simply am not permitted to post or comment on Facebook, and I'm not permitted to accept new fact checks. And I think the only thing will change that is if Facebook at some point starts using chatbots to process the appeals, because those would actually look at the content and not just the pattern, like that I'm doing it at night or that I've got lots of links and images. Anyway, so that ends this this blog post with a little bit of a bonus extra about our new debunked.org. Do check it out if it's our new place for all this nowadays. I do longer fact checks still on my Substack, and then I tweet and on Blue Sky about it. But this is the main focus now. That's where it's all happening.